I want to clarify that this podcast is distinct from my responsibilities as a professor in the Sam M. Walton College of Business. Nonetheless, it aligns with my aspiration to provide practical insights to professionals and business by showcasing companies and people that can enhance your ability to manage, lead, and strategize and market effectively in the retail value chain. And now, without further ado, let's get into the exciting episode. I have with me today Brian Nachtigall, and he is heading up Vaux for ArcBest. He has an incredible background in consulting and automation that really positioned him perfectly for the kind of role that he's in right now. But today we're going to be talking about smart autonomy and the future of warehouse innovation. I'm really excited about this. Brian's background, like I say, is amazing. So Brian, would you mind telling us a little bit about how you wound up in this position and your journey here?
Yeah, sure, man. And thank you very much for having me on the podcast. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, pleasure.
It's been a pleasure kind of getting to know you here in this role. But how I've gotten here, I'm really just thrilled to be a part of ArcBest and to have the opportunity to be leading the Vaux group and kind of taking the building blocks that the team has created over the past years and being able to build a business out of it. It's an exciting time. It's an exciting time in the industry, the evolution of technology and applying technology to warehouse automation, and really just thrilled to be here having a good time, building this business. I would say, how I got here, it just was an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. It was too good of a fit with, my background in industrial automation and combining the sort of the early career in strategy and kind of being able to put all of, the sort of the lessons that I've learned in my past and to work to kind of, build this opportunity.
Yeah, when I first read about your joining ArcBest, leading this initiative, I was thrilled, especially because of your background. You have several years of experience as a consultant with Bain Company, which is one of the best consulting firms in the world. You have incredible background with machine vision, robotics, automation technology companies, and even earlier in your career as an investment analyst. That's a unique background for something like this, but I would imagine that it really informs your current role. Is that right?
Yeah, it's funny. It is funny how you pick bits and pieces. I imagine everybody does this in their careers, but you pick bits and pieces of your background and lessons you've learned and applying them. And what's exciting for me is I'm in a role now where I'm actually getting to apply, I think, lessons from really almost nearly every one of my experiences. And so I guess, going back, as you mentioned, I have about 15 years of industrial automation experience, but kind of going all the way back. Yeah, I graduated from Princeton University, and my first job out of college was with the group that invests the endowment at Princeton. They called Princo. It was a small group of about 14 people and with about $10 billion to invest. And so just a really interesting mile-high view of the world of finance, for somebody coming out of school and kind of learning how the world works. But to me, it was probably about 20 years ago that I made the decision to kind of get out of pure investing and wanted to learn a little bit more about how what decisions are made and what goes into those decisions to actually create value in society and in the economy. And had the just great opportunity to get to go to Bain & Company. And
you went to, didn't you go to Duke first for your MBA?
So I got my MBA at Duke while working at Bain. Okay. So I spent a couple of years at Bain out in California, and then kind of returned to the East Coast and went to Duke to get my MBA at the Fuqua School of Business, and then returned to Bain, and that's what brought me up to Boston, Massachusetts, and I spent about 15 years in Boston, kind of working at Bain initially for a few more years, and then when I left Bain, it was sort of that itch again to roll up my sleeves a little further and really dig in and help build businesses. and just had the great opportunity of getting onto this trend of machine vision and robotics and industrial automation. Worked at Cognex Corporation, who's a global leader in the industrial machine vision space and manufacturing and warehouse settings. Had the opportunity at Boston Dynamics to lead their warehouse automation effort with their robot that they call Stretch, and kind of create the business model out of Stretch and build the team there. And then here, at Vaux within ArcBest, sort of the just as I mentioned earlier, the thrilled to be able to take the building blocks that they've created and really turn it into a business and set ourselves up for growth going forward.
My first academic research study that got published was published in 1990. And it was the first academic research I'd really done. It was on flexible automation. This was 1990. And I did a few other studies for a few years on flexible automation. Back then, flexible manufacturing systems was a hot topic in academics. And then it faded for a long time. But it's been interesting to me to see how, automation and robotics in the industry. Back in 1990, I think we thought we would be further along by now than we are. But you got into it really at a great time, and now it's just taking off beyond imagination. And I can't imagine. Did you see that, or did you just were you just interested in that?
A little bit of both. I grew up in a blue collar town, manufacturing town, and so the idea of using technology to make manufacturing more efficient was always something that was kind of interesting to me. And then really just had a couple of pieces fall into place, but had a consulting project at Bain and Company where we were helping a client understand how to track their product through their supply chain. And we would talk about how there are technologies to read, barcodes and data matrix codes and to be able to track products through. But as a strategy consultant, you kind of get to the point where you say, well, there are ways to do this. And then you scratch a little deeper under the surface. You say, well, okay, who are the companies? What are the solutions that do this? And you get some shoulder shrugs and some, well, they, in quotes, they can do this. Well, who's they? And you found that the technology wasn't necessarily there yet, or it wasn't clear who was providing these types of solutions. And this is back, 2010, timeframe or so. And so when I came across Cognex and the opportunity to join, Rob Willett, who was the CEO at the time at Cognex, and see what Cognex was doing, I said, okay, here's a company that is dedicated to machine vision and, doing things like, inspection using cameras and robotic guidance, but then also the reading of barcodes using cameras and the 2D codes that are used now. I said, okay, this company is onto something. There's a need here, and here's a business that is, innovating and focused on building a solution for this space. And so that was what kind of made me think, okay, Cognex is a good place to put my energy. And sure enough, it was an exciting time for Cognex. The 5 years that I spent with them, they went from about $250 million of revenue to $750 million of revenue during that time. It was just an exciting time, when the industry was adopting some of these technologies, both in the manufacturing setting and in logistics space. To your point about flexible manufacturing, it was a time when people were realizing how to use machine vision to do things like reduce batch sizes and identify defects, and then the track and trace things where, the automotive industry is figuring out how to, when they find a problem, the recalls in the automotive industry are so much smaller than they used to be because they can track a problem back through the supply chain, back to where they to where that defect actually happened, and they can recall just the cars that that were affected by a problem that they were able to diagnose with much more specificity. So exciting time there, and then but really even at that time, 10, 15 years ago, a lot of it was rules based. So you use machine vision, you program rules around, what should a robot do, or what should a manufacturing system do based on the input that it's getting from a machine vision system. And what's exciting now is really over the last 5 or 10 years is this idea of deep learning. And so you go from a rules-based approach of, I'm looking for something specific to, I'm looking for a specific thing in a specific place, to I'm looking for something somewhere, and the system can kind of find something and that you don't necessarily specifically program it to do. And so as industry gets more comfortable with this deep learning approach, and then I think the deep learning approach has led to all the generative AI stuff that's been it's been really game changing over the last couple of years, and how that leads to simulation technologies that allow these robotic systems to learn so much faster than they could before. It's really an interesting time and an exciting time.
Well, I have to say I'm impressed with your ability to describe things like that without using a bunch of jargon. That was impressive, because I was thinking of the jargon as you were explaining it, and it's good. But the other thing that was really neat about your experience there is you got to see what it's like to scale up big time. I mean, going from 250,000 to 700 million, was it?
Yeah,
that's a big scale up.
Yeah, and so one of the things, think about management systems and building a business. So, I mentioned I had the opportunity to work under Rob Willett at Cognex. So Rob had, in his background, he had sold a family business to Danaher Corporation, and then spent 10 years leading, running a business within Danaher, and also kind of learning that Danaher business system and the management philosophy and the approach to measuring a business and managing a business that way. And then he brought, when he had the opportunity to lead Cognex, he brought some of those lessons. And I say some of those lessons because in a lot of ways, sometimes that business system, at Danaher, it is part of their DNA, and they are just relentless in how they implement that management system. And so when you come into another business where you have to pick and choose which tools to apply. And I think Rob did a really effective job of that at the time at Cognex. And I take a lot of lessons away from that in terms of how, when I go into a new situation, I don't just overlay those management tools, but I've had the opportunity over this past half a year or so at ArcBest and with the team at Vaux to really kind of observe and talk to people and see, what are our products, who is our team, what is our culture, how does this group do things, what puzzle pieces do we have, and now what aspects of this management system do we apply to this specific situation. And we're in the process of doing that, right now, and kind of changing the team. And fortunately, I inherited a really strong team. ArcBest and with the Vaux team, they did an amazing job at pulling together, really talented individuals. They've built a robotics engineering team and a mechanical engineering team to build their products. And so from an engineering perspective and a product management perspective, like, a lot of the people were there. Also, ArcBest, they've been investing in innovation for a long time. And they have this pool of really talented people doing, data analytics. It shows up in things like their pricing strategies and their yield analytics to help ArcBest kind of be both competitive and price competitive for their to win business in the trucking industry, but also selective in their customers and making sure that they're profitable. And it also comes in things like their route optimization, to run the ArcBest trucking business more efficiently and effectively and more profitably. So we have this great pool of talent at ArcBest, and they've just done a great job at putting those pieces together. And now I think what I'm bringing to the table is how to organize those groups, organize those puzzle pieces in a way that we can then kind of overlay the commercial side of it and the sales side of it. How do we really focus our attention on the right markets, the attractive markets where we can make the biggest impact with customers and have the most commercial success? And how do we streamline our decision making to be moving fast and agile with building this business?
I've met a lot of these people you're talking about, and I'm super impressed with. I even know some very recent hires in that area, data science and so forth. But I think the culture there helps with recruiting top talent, because people want to work somewhere where they're going to enjoy it and they hear of other people enjoying their work. But in addition to that, one of the things I've always said, and the listeners know, Northwest Arkansas has an unusually high concentration of logistics and supply chain talent. Not just people that are actually in supply chain, but even people that are not. For example, if you go to these supplier teams in town, their salespeople can talk logistics quite a bit. Which, if you go to stay with the same CPG company, you go to a sales team in another city like Cincinnati or Minneapolis, et cetera, they don't have that ability. There's just a lot of interest in logistics and supply chain here. So for me, I'm particularly thrilled that Vaux is doing this in Northwest Arkansas. To think that Northwest Arkansas is developing advanced automation and technology around logistics, intralogistics in particular, here is exciting, and I think it's noteworthy. I'd like to shift gears just a second to set the stage. If you wouldn't mind describing a little bit about the Vaux suite, as well as the mission of Vaux within the ArcBest mission.
Right. So Vaux, Vaux within ArcBest. It kind of represents some of the strategic pillars of ArcBest in general. So ArcBest mission has three strategic pillars. It's growth, efficiency, and innovation. And they really take that innovation piece seriously, as I mentioned earlier. And things like the pricing and the route optimization things are some of the under the hood tools that they build. But then you have Vaux is really just a tangible illustration of that innovation that is part of that ArcBest DNA. And I really can't, and you touched on, the culture piece, but I also can't overstate how important that is as well, of the culture of ArcBest, the strength of character of the leadership team.
Absolutely.
And, just two of their sort of core values are integrity and excellence, and how that strength of culture just flows down through the organization. It helps us in a lot of ways. So getting in, you asked about so what is the Vaux suite of technology? So to kind of give we really kind of bucket into three product groups. So I'll start with the autonomous forklifts. So Vaux is building a robotic forklift solution. And we believe that, our solution is the fastest way for customers who are interested in automating their warehouse operations to apply and begin, reducing their operating costs, of their warehouse as fast as possible. So our approach is to automate, the forklift operations as much as possible. And then we have a human in the loop approach where the portions of the tasks that are, too challenging to automate, a person can remotely dial into those forklifts and perform those tasks via, remote operation or teleoperation. And so by doing that, we have a low upfront infrastructure investment required. So we can come in and within 4 to 6 weeks be up and running at a customer, and a customer doesn't really need to change their infrastructure for us. We can operate within a customer's process, and so that's our automated forklift business. We call it smart autonomy. Another piece of our business is on the. It's really a relatively low tech, although there's smarts. It's an intelligent solution to it, but we call it freight movement system. But these large staging platforms that allow customers to stage freight, and then it can quickly and smoothly roll that freight into and out of trailers. So we have some patented technology in how these rollers engage, so that it can carry heavy freight, but then still roll around a warehouse or into and out of trailers. And we're finding that's really effective for situations where customers have either freight that can't be stacked. So we have a scaffolding system where you can make 2 or 3 layers of freight in a trailer that otherwise couldn't be stacked. So you can cut down on your number of trucking routes, that way, or number of runs on your routes that way. We're also finding it's really useful in applications where you have shuttle runs, where the loading and unloading time is high relative to the travel distance. So that's particularly effective in things like the automotive sector, where you have parts warehouses relatively close to the assembly plants, and you're doing a lot of shuttle runs back and forth in a situation like that. And then we're also kind of stumbled on this opportunity in the data center space, where we found that it's really valuable for high value electronics, whereas high value and sensitive electronics, where our staging platform allows it to be touched fewer times, and we can handle kind of some of the vibration sensitivity over the roads. And so we're talking to players in the data center space
that could be huge. That's such a big and growing business right now with all the AI, and even companies taking data out of the cloud and back to their native servers.
Yeah, it's obviously a huge trend. It's on a lot of people's mind. There's this build out of the data center space, and we're doing our best to do our part to kind of help that industry move forward. There's a lot of these, especially the hyperscalers. They're working on kind of prefabricating or pre-manufacturing as much of the server infrastructure so that it can just be kind of rolled into place and plugged in as much as possible to make kind of the startup of the data centers as fast and as streamlined as possible. And we're helping customers in that space.
I know part of what Vaux is doing is trying to make autonomous warehousing available to all businesses. Could you talk a little bit about that from a deployment type perspective?
Yeah, so I mentioned that we believe that we're the fastest way to automate your warehouse or your forklift operations and pallet movement. And basically, what I mean by that is we have a relatively low cost method of outfitting kind of a network communications infrastructure in a warehouse, which is important because you need seamless connectivity when you're driving connected forklifts around in a warehouse. We have the technology to remote in and do this teleop approach. So, the drivers of the forklift, we can, from a safety perspective, we get people off the floor and, working more of an office environment as opposed to, out on the warehouse floor. And we can, we can implement that quickly in a customer's current process. So we're not asking a customer to apply or to change their process or put a lot of additional infrastructure. So, we can come in and begin working quickly with the customer.
Brian, of course, ArcBest has over 100-year history. They made it through deregulation, the Motor Carrier Act of 1980, successfully, which was not easy to do. Very few firms have done that. And of course, after the Motor Carrier Act of 1980, the LTL industry started forming. And because ArcBest has been, they're in all kinds of areas of logistics now, but, after that, they really specialized to LTL. But LTL requires different types of trucks for line haul versus pickup and delivery. It requires cross-docking terminals, many things that other kinds of trucking companies don't need, like full truckload trucking companies. But since then, of course, ArcBest has expanded into many different other areas of logistics. So Vaux has an advantage, and I'd love to hear what you think it is by being a part of this rich history and the capability set as compared to, say, a startup in the same space.
Yeah, I think being a part of ArcBest is, in a way, it's sort of our superpower, right? Our hidden superpower. So we benefit from in a lot of ways just that inherent knowledge that the other employees at ArcBest have about how real world operations work. So when we have an idea of how to improve a process, or we talk to people about ways to improve their processes, we can kind of test those ideas or those hypotheses with people who can say, this is how a person on a warehouse floor would operate that or would do that. And so we can quickly kind of narrow down how do we create a solution that can be effective in a real world environment? How do we handle real world freight and the challenges that come with that? It's more than just having access to the test environment, which is wonderful, by the way, to be able to take a prototype or a solution and test it in a real world environment and get that feedback. That's a big benefit. But it's also just a team that inherently knows what's important and what it takes to do something in such an industrial environment. So one example is just the IT team. And I mentioned how ArcBest invests a lot in innovation and IT, but there's a whole team of people that understands the importance of a reliable IT network and in a secure IT network when we're putting advanced robotic solutions into facilities. That the cybersecurity topic is an important one, and we have a team of people that knows what's necessary to have a good solution, and something that our customers will be nodding their heads in the right direction when we discuss the things that we're doing with respect to cybersecurity, with respect to safety, and how much we invest and the team that we have to be looking at safety and with our robotic solutions and so forth, things like that.
That is interesting. I hadn't thought of the safety aspect of it, but you're right. I mean, with ArcBest having to operate these terminals and all the transportation equipment they have in the terminals, outside of the terminals, over the road, et cetera, et cetera. And I know safety has been a big part of ArcBest's approach as long as I've known them. But I hadn't thought about that. That's something a startup wouldn't necessarily have access to, that rich knowledge and background.
Yeah, and it's also just it's part of clearly for almost any industrial company, safety has to be a part of their DNA, right? It's paramount, right? It's more than just a talking point. It's the importance of your employees have families to go home to at the end of the day, and so you have to do your job, we have to have processes that make it, that show that importance, that our employees can go home at the end of the day. And sort of on top of that, so clearly when we're applying robotic solutions, the importance of putting safety systems in place is critical, right? And we make sure that is of utmost importance. But then also the understanding of, for our customers, the cost of safety. So, when we talk about getting kind of people off the floor, part of it is also reducing the liability of a company, the risk of, companies are paying insurance premiums based on the risk of a safety incident happening. And if you get people off the floor, and so our systems are not just automating as much as possible, but with the human teleop approach, the people that are then remoting in and driving those forklifts are in an office environment as opposed to on the warehouse floor. And so you're further reducing that liability cost as well.
That is really a great point. So I'd like to dig in a little bit more to the Vaux Smart Autonomy. I was really intrigued by that. And of course, as I said earlier, it's exciting to know this kind of technology is being developed here in Northwest Arkansas, but it's really already developed. It's not like it's developing. It's a product that's usable today, but you're still trying to develop it further. But if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about the building blocks of that.
Yeah, sure. So I would say at a basic level, it's that network communications infrastructure that we go in. We will install that at a customer. It's the IT integration so that we can both connect our remote our kind of the remote teleoperation labor, and then on the robotic forklifts themselves. Well, before I get to the robotic forklifts, you have the communications network, and we'll go in and we'll map a warehouse. So we're creating a digital twin of a warehouse, and once you have that map of a warehouse, and we apply the robotic forklifts or the automated forklifts to that map to operate in that setting. So then the additional kind of technology stack is the fleet management. So when you have multiple vehicles operating, in a warehouse, and the sort of the traffic management of those vehicles is one layer of the stack. There's the safety layer of the stack that I touched on earlier to make sure that the vehicles are operating safely. They have all the sensors and the awareness of what's around them to operate. And then it's that teleop setup as well. So we can operate, autonomously as much as possible, and we have the sensor suite and the autonomy stack to do that, and then the teleoperation interface. So someone can kind of see when a forklift kind of raises its hand and says, "Hey, I have below threshold confidence in a particular task," and raises his hand, and a teleoperator can dial into that forklift and perform the task, and then turn it back over to the autonomous mode.
So earlier, Brian mentioned digital twins, and you can think of it as if you think back to just regular discrete event simulation, where you simulate something to figure out how you should maybe lay something out, design something. Digital twins are a little different in the sense that it is simulation, it's simulating it, but it's doing it over and over in real time. So every time something changes, it's simulating the process. And as it simulates, then decisions can be made based on the output. It's behind the scenes. People don't see it, but that's basically what it is.
Yeah, there's the simulation piece of testing and building our technology, making sure that it works when it goes out into the world, and that's part of what's helping us, as well as a lot of companies across the robotics ecosystem to push these things forward. And then when we talk about digital twins, one of the other things that I'm just really excited about is how we are putting these technologies together to improve the data integrity for in a lot of ways for other systems. So our customers and a lot of businesses out there, they have WMS systems, warehouse management systems. That WMS software relies on good data about where the freight is. So a WMS system can provide guidance on move this freight from here to there, or here's how the flow of freight should go. But sometimes when you have manual operation within a warehouse, that those pallets get put, in different places that it's easy to lose sight of exactly where your freight is. When you have a robotic or an automated approach to moving pallets around, where that freight is. And so I see kind of if you step back, a lot of what we're doing here is we're part of this warehouse digitization trend of improving sort of the amount of data that a business has about where its freight is in the warehouse, which just kind of amplifies the value of things like WMS systems.
That is a great point. One of the things that struck me, and this, when I first learned about Vaux and what was going on, is a problem came to my mind, and that is that, companies have distribution centers in different regions, and sometimes the demands on those regions vary somewhat unpredictably. You might be able to know the total demand. Like if you have 20 distribution centers across the country, if you look at the total demand, it's fairly predictable. But if you get down to a specific DC, it may be that the demand on that DC is low when the demand on another DC is high. And this can be happening because of many reasons. It can be happening because of, seasons shift over time, naturally. You may need more gardening type supplies in one region earlier than you thought you would. And you may have it there, but you've got a constraint of labor there. Mm-hmm. And you've got labor in another facility that you wish you could teleport them there to use it, but you can't. And then you've got, distribution centers where, it's they're opening on the East Coast before they are in the other parts of the country, and then they're closing on the West Coast way after other parts of the country have closed. And then there's just random variation that you can't really explain, but it exists. And so when I first heard about this, I thought this idea of load balancing would be a big benefit to many industries, especially retail and certain areas of consumer goods. Would you mind speaking to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we could probably nerd out for a while and talk about stochastic analysis and the quantitative analysis on how to handle the volatility in these things. But and I even draw upon we talked about earlier about previous experience. It has similarities to things like portfolio theory.
Yes.
And spreading the risk around by diversification. So yeah, a customer that has multiple warehouses, say across the country, and they have uncertain demand, and they're trying to match their supply of labor. In our specific situation, we're talking about forklift drivers' labor, and they're trying to match that planned labor to the demand level. And the demand level may vary based on seasonality, based on the uncertainty in their labor. People, they have to account for whether people may call in sick or, be available. And if you have multiple sites across the country, if you can pull that demand, you're basically smoothing out your volatility in demand. And so we're enabling you to pull that demand. So things like, the availability of labor kind of gets smoothed out. Then also the timing variability there. So if a seasonal business that, let's say, in the springtime, based on the weather pattern, when it gets warmer, people start to want to get out and do their spring cleaning, or get out and do their yard work or do their DIY projects a little sooner. So, the building supply or the home improvement stores want to, get their product onto the shelves sooner if you have a relatively warm, end of winter. And they may or may not plan for that in their labor planning. And what we do is, by pooling that labor together, they could turn that labor on quickly across their network of warehouses, rather than have to plan ahead of time, either overstaffing, which costs money, or understaffing, which means that they end up with some stockout problems, and not having the product on the shelves or available in their supply chain as early as they might. They might have it exactly when they planned to have it months ago, before they knew how the weather would pan out, but too late relative to a relatively warm spring in that example.
I think that when people first hear about this kind of technology, they think, okay, we reduce labor costs, and it's true. And as you pointed out, you can reduce liability costs and injuries and things like this. But this ability to load balance, as you're describing so clearly, it reduces stockouts. That, in some cases, winds up being more valuable than anything, because, especially if you're a supplier to the retail channel, if you wind up having late deliveries, not only do you miss sales, which is expensive, but sometimes you get charged for being late, and that's expensive. But the other thing is, if you can smooth that out, you don't need as much safety stock. So you need less safety stock. And I think it reduces bullwhip. And this is something, for those of you that don't know, bullwhip is the idea that small perturbations in demand or requirements usage at the bottom echelon of a supply chain get amplified as they move up the supply chain, which causes additional problems like stockouts and safety stock. It becomes a vicious cycle. So anytime you can pool like this and really get to the root problem of these kinds of things, the whole supply chain operates more efficiently.
And really, just it's reducing that volatility, which reduces that bullwhip effect. But then also the greater data integrity of knowing what's in your warehouse is another. It's just another source of volatility. Sometimes they have to overstock because they don't necessarily know exactly what's in their supply chain. So both the data integrity and the ability to make decisions later in the cycle, all reduces that that bullwhip effect.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. That information accuracy solves a lot of problems, and it makes people more confident when they're making decisions to know that the data is accurate. Brian, could you share an example of how Vaux has moved the needle for a customer?
Yeah, I think the clearest one in my mind is a customer that we worked with who was a little uncertain about using our remote labor. They loved the idea of automating the forklifts, getting their drivers off the floor, but they wanted to use their own labor in their facility. And so we were working with them on that. We were up and running. We were helping them, with our robotic forklifts in their facility, and their labor was just in an office setting off, to the side of their warehouse floor. But then, unfortunately, they had a week where, for a number of different reasons, the people that they had staffed to be manning their forklifts, remotely operating, but on site, were unable to be there. And they came to us and said, hey, we've already integrated our IT system. We're kind of in a bind here. We have product that needs to move and our guys aren't here this week. Can we, is there any way that we could turn on, Vaux's remote labor to help us move this freight? And we were able to, within about 4 hours, get, our guys up and running, connected in to the forklifts operating in this customer's facility, and we were moving their freight for them that day. And shortly after, I was talking with the head of strategy at this business, and he was just saying, yeah, that's this idea of being able to leverage a pooled group of remote labor is really an area where our feelings on this topic have matured over time, or have evolved over time, because it was so seamless of a transition to using this labor that was really very far away, and just but connecting in and and operating in our facility, and it worked really well. And so it was a very poignant example of where you kind of saw the light turn on for a customer, and how they saw, wow, this can be even more valuable than we even thought.
Very impressive. Where do you see Vaux going over the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. So in some ways, I'm really excited at just further penetrating the market. We have a solution that works, and just getting the word out and working with more customers, solving more customers' challenges, and with getting this solution out there and applying it and rolling it out and making a difference for more and more customers. I think about some of the research and development that we're doing, in addition to continuing to improve our product and our solution. But some of the real game changing things are this furthering the idea of digitizing the warehouse and providing even more data on the location of freight, and to enable their things like their WMS systems and their visibility of their operations and their workflows. And I see that as a way that we can really have a really large impact on, it's not just, while we can reduce their cost on things like moving freight on our MPs, in and out of trucks, and we can reduce their operating costs in their forklift operations. But when we really show them the amount of the greater data integrity, the amount of information that they can have about the location of their freight in their facility with the digital twin technology and things like that, moving that forward is something that's going to be game changing in the industry.
So I know I've been around ArcBest for 30 years, and I know they've got a very human-centered approach to business. And I know it goes way back before I was ever introduced to ArcBest. And Vaux is focused on robotics and automation. So I'm just curious, how do you balance that with the human-centered approach?
Yeah. So one of our leaders recently said, in an interview, technology drives change, but it's the people that make it happen.
I like that.
And it's kind of, if you take a step back to like how ArcBest treats its technology in general, right? We're not turning systems over to AI, agents. We're using technology as tools for our people to help our customers more and more. And so, and Vaux is, what we're doing here is we're bringing tools and solutions to our customers that allow, people to be more efficient, to use those tools to just be more productive. And I think that's a lot of what we're doing.
So Vaux is, creating a lot more visibility and information that's useful to systems like WMS, ERP, et cetera. What are you thinking about there, and how do they link in and help?
Yeah, I think that, there's a lot of potential, and there are companies out there that are selling the dream of what can be done, in a future world where, there's a perfect digital twin for everything. And then you could have a simulated kind of, a simulated version of what's going to happen, and have, a lot of information about that before you actually do things in the real world. And, the reality is that the data in the real world is very imperfect, but the more data that you can provide and collect and have that data integrity, the more you can simulate kind of decision making, simulate decisions going forward, or simulate workflows, or provide guidance on. So in our world, it's how to flow freight around in a warehouse. And there are a lot of other companies that are in all walks of life talking about how to create these digital twins that can simulate decision making, whether it be in the defense industry or otherwise. But we are doing our part of this, in intralogistics or in the warehouse. So ArcBest box, we're focused on, how are we moving freight around or moving pallets around in a warehouse, and providing better data for that. Things like, and I haven't even really spoken about it yet, but our Vaux Vision product, which is a new product we're working with early adopter customers at this point, but it's an on the forklift dimensioning capability where, cameras and sensors that can be installed onto a forklift will capture the dimensions of freight. It's used, it's important to anywhere you have, multiple parties that are passing freight around, whether it's a 3PL moving freight for another customer, or a vendor sending freight through a B2B distributor, where, they want kind of good data integrity around what the dimensions are of that freight, which helps them move the freight, either price their services more effectively or more accurately, or move the freight more efficiently through their supply chain. So we're excited about that and bringing that solution as well.
That's great. So what advice would you have for, say, a leader in a company that's trying to future-proof their intralogistics capabilities and operations?
Yeah, what I would say is, from my experience in the robotics space, I'm a real believer in what we're doing with the human in the loop approach, to not try to fully automate everything and make that large and upfront investment in infrastructure to have a fully automated lights out system. I'm a believer in applying automation where you can, but the human in the loop approach that we have is what I feel like is the right way to say, let's automate what we can. Let's have a human kind of dial in and do what's currently challenging with existing state-of-the-art technology, but we can continue to push the ball forward. I think it's the right balance to make a real impact on real-world operations, reducing operating costs, but kind of moving the ball forward with automating and improving. It's all about continuous improvement. And, we're getting to a world where, we'll have a lights out warehouse, but that's a pretty far down the road, too far for me to make, to justify a business case for building a business. And really too far for our customers to be justifying their spend on robotics. But I really believe, the approach of saying, let's automate what we can, and this human in the loop approach to handle, the cases that are challenging. It's at least my advice on how to make improvements and make your investment in automation pay off quickly.
Of course, I think if ArcBest could have said, okay, we're going to design someone's experience so that they're perfectly suited for this job, you would fit that. But my question to you is, and you've already moved the needle, I've heard just your ability to articulate what Vaux is about, where you're going, is impressive. But what are you most excited about in leading Vaux in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to be a part of ArcBest. I mentioned the cultural elements of that. It's a group, it's a team that I'm just proud to be a part of, I think is one. I'm excited to be making, have an opportunity to build this business that can really make a difference in how our customers and are performing their warehouse operations, and making a difference in how, kind of the efficiency of the supply chain. We're doing our part, to make the supply chain more efficient and lower cost and everything. And it's exciting to be helping customers in that way. And, and honestly, the more customers we help, the more jobs we create for our own team. So I believe we've got a great culture, and we've got a great business and a great team to be building. And so, creating jobs that are rewarding both emotionally and financially for our team members and our employees is what kind of is a big part of what it's about, and what gets me excited about things. And so, really having a really good time, basically with the people I'm working with the customers I'm able to work with, and the technology, being at the forefront of this technology, is great.
Well, Brian, this has been so much fun. I really feel like I've learned a lot through this, and about what Vaux is doing, where you're going, benefits. Thank you for taking time to share with us about this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt. It's really a pleasure to be here with you.